led by architect and director Daniel Burnham.
And Daniel Burnham?
Lighting up over 100,000 bulbs.
Dead. American history.
There are moments in history that feel too perfect, too composed, too grand, too sure of themselves. Moments that seem like someone or something is trying very hard to prove a point. And in 1904, in the middle of Missouri, that point took a physical form. This wasn't just a fair. It was something else. Something carefully made, meticulously planned, and, for a while, impossible to ignore. They called it the Louisiana Purchase Exposition. But for most people, they knew it by another name, the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair. On paper, it was a celebration, a centennial nod to a land deal that changed the shape of the country. But once you step beyond the brochures, once you look at what actually was built, you begin to understand that it wasn't about commemoration. It was about projection. St. Louis didn't host a party. It built an illusion. 1,200 acres of it. White palaces, artificial lakes, a city designed to be admired and then erased. A place made for applause and nothing else. It was the largest World's Fair the world had ever seen, and maybe still the strangest. 20 million people came to see it. That's more than the population of New York, Chicago, and Philadelphia combined at that time. They came from every corner of the globe to walk a place that shouldn't have existed and wouldn't exist again. 1,500 buildings constructed in less than 2 years, made mostly of a material called staff, a mixture of plaster and fiber. It looked like marble, but it was paper thin. Decorative, temporary, a lie that gleamed under the Missouri sun. At its center sat Festival Hall, a massive structure, crowned with a dome so large it could be seen from nearly anywhere on the grounds. It wasn't just a centerpiece, it was a watchtower. It loomed, it judged, it set the tone for everything else. Behind it, something even more strange. The Cascades of Art Hill. A series of sculpted terraces, water cascading down in perfect stages. Not natural, not accidental. This wasn't a fountain. It was a controlled event. Every drop of water, every step, every ledge, measured, calculated, and intentional. It turned a Missouri hillside into a European dream, but if you look too closely, it started to feel like something else entirely. Like a memory of a place that never existed, at the bottom of a hill. A grand basin, a still mirror-like pool, stretching wide and shallow, reflecting statues, structures, and the faces of those who stood at its edge. Some called it the most beautiful man-made landscape they had ever seen, but others, they noticed something quieter, a kind of emptiness. The beauty was overwhelming, but the meaning, harder to grasp, because it wasn't built to last, and it wasn't built for them. Just beyond it stood the Palace of Fine Arts, one of the only buildings not designed to be destroyed. It's still there today, the St. Louis Art Museum. But in 1904, it felt like something else entirely. A shrine to culture, a monument to taste, but also a mask. Because what stood behind those neoclassical columns wasn't just art. It was proof. Proof that America could mimic elegance, that it could take the old world and make it new. And this was just the beginning.
You ever hear a story that's just a little too clean? Every piece locked in place, every name remembered, every number neatly rounded. The 1904 St. Louis World's Fair is one of those stories. 1,000 buildings, a glowing city of domes, a Roman Empire raised on Missouri soil in just a few years. Then, poof, gone. Nothing left but a museum, a few arches, and some really proud postcards. And still, nobody asked the obvious question. How? They'll tell you it took about 3 years, that the fair was delayed just 1 year to get it all just right. But in that time, they supposedly cleared and flattened 1,200 acres, built 1,500 ordnance structures, installed electricity, water, sewage, roads, rail lines, fountains, bridges. Created a full working city out of nothing. All that at the turn of the century, with horses, pickaxes, and steam engines. Right. They say it was made of staff, a plaster mixture slapped over wooden frames. And yet, some buildings had stone foundations, some had steel supports, and one, the Palace of Fine Arts, is still standing today, solid, proud, quiet. So if that one survived, why did the rest get demolished? What was really under that plaster? Let's talk about the heart of the fair, Festival Hall. With its sweeping dome, classical geometry, and a commanding perch at the top of Art Hill. But behind it, that's where things get weird. The Cascades, a massive waterfall system flowing down a sculpted staircase of terraces into the Grand Basin. Beautiful, yes, but also functional. Running water, pumps, piping, volume, pressure. All day, every day, for 7 months. And yet, we're told that it was made of plaster and wood. They created a full hydraulic system that moved hundreds of gallons of water down a tiered landscape, and it held perfectly with temporary materials. That's not just impressive, that's suspicious. And then they demolished it. Why? No one really says. It was meant to be temporary, of course. Just like Chicago, 1893. Just like San Francisco, 1915. But here's where it gets really strange. We have thousands of photographs from the fair. Smiling crowds, parading delegations, lit up buildings. But there's one thing we don't have. photos of it being built. Where are they? Where are the teams laying the foundations? Where are the cranes hoisting domes? Where's the scaffolding, the supply wagon, the labor force? And when it ended, where are the demolition photos? 1,000 buildings wiped clean, and no one snapped a photo. That's not a coincidence. That's a cover-up. Or at least a rewrite. Now let's step back. The fairgrounds were laid in Forest Park, an area once covered in ancient mounds built by the Mississippian people, a culture known for its astronomy, architecture, and alignment. By 1904, most of the mounds were gone, leveled. But what if they weren't just wiped out? What if they were built over? What if the fair's grand designs were not new, but uncovered? Let's talk about what they were showing off. Electricity, x-rays, air conditioning, wireless telephones, a moving sidewalk. In 1904, most people were still lighting candles at home, but here, they were walking on conveyor belts and talking without wires. You don't go from kerosene lamps to a lit up paradise with music, machines, and glowing architecture unless someone's holding back. Maybe it wasn't about unveiling the future. Maybe it was about revealing something already known, but only in pieces. Maybe the fair is more than an exposition. Maybe it was a ritual. Think about it. A perfect city, a perfect timeline, a perfect demolition. Build it, display it, destroy it. Like a play, like a controlled memory. One build, not just to impress the public, but to erase something older. And look at the pattern. Chicago, St. Louis, San Francisco, New York. Each with a miracle fair, each with impossible construction, each burned or bulldozed when the curtains closed. Not a mystery anymore. It's a blueprint. And St. Louis, it followed it to the letter. Now, most people will stop here. They'll call it coincidence, just history. But you're not most people. You saw the missing photos, the flawless timelines, the eerily Roman architecture in an American park. You heard the fountains, and something in your gut whispered, that wasn't normal. The 1904 St. Louis World Fair wasn't just a celebration. It was a reset, a reframing, a rewriting of something they don't want us to remember. Because when you build a city of light, show it to the world, and then burn it down, you're not just showing off. You're burying something. And for a moment, just a moment, you almost got away with it. The winners write the history books, but if you know where to look, you can still hear the real story echoing in the silence they left behind.
You might think it was just a park, some buildings, some pavilions, some fountains, but the deeper you go, the more impossible it becomes. The Palace of Agriculture was over 20 acres under a single roof. You could fit dozens of football fields inside, and it was full, with machines, dioramas, with carefully labeled soil samples from every corner of the nation. It was obsessive. Row after row of innovation. A temple to crops and irrigation systems, built with cathedral precision. The palace of transportation was worse. It was so massive. They suspended full-size trains from the ceiling. Not models, real trains. Hanging, floating above the heads of visitors like some dream of an industrial afterlife. People walked beneath them, silhouetted by steel. They stared into the engines that had built the continent, and they called it progression. Across the grounds, other buildings rose like ghosts of a future not yet real. The palace of electricity, the palace of machinery, the palace of liberal arts. Each one filled with marvels, and yet, somehow, none of them felt alive. Because beneath the white paint and polished brass, everything was hollow. The walls were fake, stone was plaster, the permanence was just an illusion. And that illusion extended even deeper, because to build this place, they rewrote the land. They rerouted rivers, they leveled hills, they built drainage systems, sewage lines, power grids, all of these from scratch. Over 200 miles of piping, 10,000 workers working day and night, supplies arriving by train at a rate nearly 1,000 deliveries per day. Why? Why go this far? Why build a city only to erase it? Was it pride? Was it ego? Or was it something weirder? Something more insecure? Because beneath all the grandeur, a question lingers. What kind of country builds its identity out of things designed to disappear? Over 60 countries took part, from Europe, Asia, and Africa. Some were willing, others, their cultures were broken down, repackaged, put on display for passing Americans like pages in a pop-up book. There were recreated villages, fake temples, and what they called ethnological exhibits. A sanitized world tour designed not to teach, but to reinforce. The U.S. had taken the world and shrunk it. 1 mile, perfectly walkable, and was easily categorized. This wasn't diplomacy. It was dominance by display. And in the midst of it all, something else. Something unexpected. The Olympic Games. The first ever held on American soil. But it wasn't the Olympics as we know them. It was chaotic. Underfunded. Thrown into the fair like a last-minute sideshow. And yet, it happened. Athletes from across the world competed in front of roaring crowds. Some ran barefoot. Others collapsed mid-race from exhaustion. Water stations were sparse, and officials lost track of scores. And in one event, the marathon, a runner hitchhiked part of the way and still didn't win. They called it a success, but behind the headlines, it was strange, chaotic, and in some cases, deeply unethical. Because that's the thing about the fair. It was beautiful, but also very careless. And that's the part no one remembers. Or maybe the part we're just not supposed to. By December 1904, the fair was over, and with shocking speed, it was torn down. Not because it had failed, but because it was never meant to last. It was a city born to vanish. In months, most of it was gone. The palaces, promenades, and the pavilions, all dismantled and burned and on their way to be forgotten. All except for a few things. The art museum, still standing, and the grand basin that is still reflecting. And the paths through the forest park where shadows of what once was still linger. If you walk there today, you won't see the city, but if you listen closely, you might still hear the fountains of the Cascades, the hum of electric trolleys, and the echo of 20 million footsteps. And maybe for a second, you'll feel it again. That hum, that ambition, the quiet desperation to prove something, whatever it may be, to the world. The 1904 St. Louis World's Fair wasn't just an exposition, and it wasn't just a party. It was a mirror held up to the nation, still trying to figure out who it was. And what it saw was potential, but also artifice, power, and also control. A future, but maybe not the one we thought we were building. For one fleeting moment, in a city on the Mississippi, America showed the world what it could do.
Unless it wasn't an achievement at all, but a funeral. A perfectly lit, meticulously staged funeral for something ancient, something magnificent, something they didn't want us to ever see again. They told us it was temporary. They told us it was entertainment. They told us it was the future. But what if they were lying? What if this wasn't built by us, but left for us? What if it wasn't progress, but the last flicker of a world we weren't supposed to remember? Because what they showed us in St. Louis, what they let us see, was too beautiful, too perfect, too impossible. And then they lit the match. They crushed the domes. They shattered the fountains. They silenced the echoes. Not because it was fragile, but because it was dangerous. Dangerous to the story they've written. Dangerous to the lies we still teach. Dangerous to the truth buried just beneath our feet. St. Louis wasn't a fair. It was a warning. A city that never should have existed, rising from the earth like a ghost, only to be burned, buried, and wiped from memory. But you can't unsee it. Not once you really look. You can't erase the shape of those arches, the eerie glow of electric fountains, the feeling in your gut that says, this wasn't supposed to be here. And still, it was. It was here. And now it's gone. Burned to ash, erased from the skyline, scrubbed from our textbooks. But not from our questions, not from our curiosity, not from the minds of those that feel that something has been stolen. Because what they did in St. Louis, that wasn't just a demolition. That was a cover-up, a ritual, a surgical extraction of truth, wrapped in plaster and fireworks. And the scariest part, they did it right in front of us, right in front of millions of people, and no one questioned a thing. That's the part that should haunt you. Not the fire, not the rubble, not the silence, but the fact that something so beautiful, so grand, so impossible was destroyed, and the world just moved on like it never happened. So sleep well tonight, if you can. But don't be surprised if St. Louis finds its way into your dreams. Because cities don't just vanish. Not like that. Not without a reason. And not without leaving something behind.
If you enjoyed this polished retelling of progress and civilization,
and if you're questioning what's really been buried under the official story,
then don't forget to like the video.
Share with the ones who aren't afraid to ask why.
Follow and subscribe for new episodes uncovering forgotten marvels.
And the history that still yaps beneath the ruins.
Because the past isn't silent, it's yapping.